and welcome to episode number 54 of The Pitcher or the Hitter, the podcast by the M-SABR Dynasty League for the M-SABR Dynasty League. I am Cam.
I'm Sahil.
And the World Series is over. Today we're recording this on Thursday. The World Series ended, I believe it was Tuesday. And what this means for the league is, of course, we've got our big roster crunch coming up. We previewed our preview last week. It's time for the preview. And there are a lot of players who could be cut. A lot of going to be a lot of activity, even more so than last year. So there's going to be a lot to talk about.
Yeah, I'm excited. I forgot that we did a preview to the preview last week, so I am excited for the preview. Just as I was excited for the preview to the preview. But yeah, do we want to get in right away with one of the big names? So this is an obvious cut. Buster Posey surprisingly has retired. I certainly didn't see this coming. I mean, it seemed like the question was whether the Giants would give him a qualifying offer or whether they'd sign him to like a 2 or 3 year deal. I thought maybe he'd play a bit more first base, but Hester Yuki to kind of makes him an obvious cut.
Yeah, it does. And we've been talking in the past how Yuki should have traded Posey with him having a great year. Just being a surprise, being a position Yuki has a lot of. He should have traded him at some point during the season. And now with Posey being gone, Yuki's not going to get any more production out of him. So that just makes that non-trade look even worse for him.
Yeah, I can't remember off the top of my head what he was offered before the trade deadline, but I know he was offered some pretty decent stuff for Posey, and it was, he has real Muto, so it's not like he's lacking a catcher. He's the worst team in the league in terms of record. I mean, he has a number 1 overall pick for a reason. It made absolutely no sense. And, I said this to you earlier today. I had this epiphany while driving to class. And I was like, you know what Yuki is? Yuki's the Colorado Rockies. And you know why Yuki is the Colorado Rockies? Because
why is Yuki the Colorado Rockies?
Because they refuse to live in reality. They refuse to make the trades that are necessary. They unnecessarily keep these older guys and start them when they have some younger talent that they should probably be accumulating and given opportunities to. I think Yuki has this idea that he's going to compete more than he actually is, and just the refusal to make trades that he should make. It's as simple as that, and it's. I feel like he's just beating to the beat of his own drum here. And to be clear, Yuki's made a lot of good moves. So, he's ripped me off a couple of times too. So I'm not saying that Yuki's a bad owner or anything, but I definitely get some Rockies vibes from some of these lacking moves that he's making.
Well, I hope we get angry letters about this comment from both Yuki and Andrew. That is a harsh statement, but there's certainly some truth to it. And I think next week what we're going to do is we're going to come up with comparisons for real life teams for all 12 teams in this league. Is that correct?
Yeah. I'm excited for that. I know that you kind of put that in the chat last off season, I believe.
I think so.
Yeah, but obviously, teams change each year, both in our fantasy league and in real life. I think that would be fun to actually have it officially codified on a podcast rather than one of a gazillion Slack messages that we can no longer access. So I know I've given you my thoughts on a couple already and vice versa. So I'm excited. I think it's going to be a fun exercise.
Yeah, I think so. But yeah, so we've talked about that. And Yuki's going to have a couple other cuts to make, I think. We're already talking about his team. And let's kind of use this, I guess, as our transition into talking about all of the roster cuts we think are going to happen. And last year there were fewer players left on IL spots than there were this year. But there were also a lot more moves going on, lots of trades. This year there have been no trades yet. So teams, there's a kind of a bit of a gridlock here, it seems like, where no one No one's willing to take on any players from other teams because they've all got issues of their own. But yeah, continuing on with Yuki's team, I guess. He's only got 3 guys to cut, but it's going to be a little bit tricky to find where he could do that. He doesn't have very many. Well, I know a lot of teams could just straight up cut relievers. That's probably most of the cuts we're going to see are relievers, since you can just add guys back later there. But as for Yuki, he doesn't have a lot of those. We might see him forced to cut some of his younger guys like Taylor Walls or Carter Kaiboom. Those are 2 guys that I'm keeping an eye out on to see if he manages to hold on to them. They're younger guys who really haven't performed a ton at the major league level. And so they could be on the chopping block.
Yeah, I think it only ends up being 2 guys once he cuts Posey. But yeah, I mean, I would agree that Taylor Walls is definitely an option. And I think that's more of, with Wander Franco there, with Vidal Brujan, Brandon Lau, Joey Wendell, just all those guys in the infield. I don't really see Taylor Walls carving out a significant role. And I think Yuki likes him more than most teams. I can also see David Fletcher low-key as a cut. He was terrible this year, 296 OBP. I mean, the 15 steals are all right, but he's, only 2 homers. He's not really contributing much else. I don't think Yuki ends up cutting him, but I think that's somebody who you can have your eye on. One guy who I think absolutely should be cut is Dallas Keuchel. I mean, he had a terrible year. I'm not even sure he's going to have a rotation spot for the White Sox next year. I think he will as that 5th starter. I don't think they're going to be particularly happy about it, but I think I think he has a decision or 2 to make, but I mean, I think there are teams with a lot harder decisions to make. I think Yuki might end up having to make at most 1 decision he's a little shaky on. And the Posey retirement really helped. But you did mention that last year there were a lot of trades made, which I think helped alleviate that kind of gridlock. Which I don't, which has not happened this year, like you said. But do you want to guess how many trades were made in between the end of last season to today's date of last year, which is now November 4th?
I am going to guess. I know you said somewhere in the range of 50 last week. My guess is going to be 62.
It was actually 43 last week. It is at 50 exactly.
Okay.
So that's
okay.
50 trades.
Yeah, so 50 is still a ton. It's absurd, but
Cam and I did an episode early on last year during that period, which was we recapped 20 trades. If you recall, that was one of my favorite episodes. They were coming in so fast that finally we were just like, we're gonna have an entire episode just dedicated to all of these trades. And I know we've talked about some of the factors, basketball and hockey are up this year. We're not all trapped at home with COVID. The fact that teams seem to have more cuts this year than usual, which is interesting. I don't know why that is necessarily, but here we are. I wonder if we're going to see another trade go down. Actually, as we're recording right now, I was just offered a trade.
Interesting. Yeah, no, we'll see. And as for those 20 trades, we're going to talk later in the episode about a few from last year. But yeah, I know you mentioned David Fletcher.
Yeah.
And speaking of David Fletcher, let's talk about Nick Madrigal. They're very similar guys. And Nick Madrigal, Connor's got a tough spot. He's only got 4 guys on the IL currently. But really his team's in an interesting position. He just made the finals. He doesn't have a lot of star power on his team, but he's got a lot of good players, but very few great players. So really, that really puts him in a tough spot here, because there aren't a lot of cuttable guys either. And I was thinking that honestly, with his all solid guys approach, he could be a good trade match with Ruthvik even. But really, it's hard to look at this and see a lot of cuttable guys. Maybe you cut Hansel Robles. I don't know, maybe Andrew Chafin or Josh Stomont could go. Looking at his hitters, do you want to cut Adolis Garcia? You could probably find a taker for him. Maybe Gavin Sheets gets cut. He could be an easy one, but he was just traded for pretty recently. And then looking down, it kind of clicked a little bit. What about Nick Madrigal? He's a guy. He doesn't have a super high ceiling. And the fact that Connor took him because he was the White Sox guy, now that he's not on the White Sox anymore, he's on the Cubs. That's kind of a couple things clicked in my mind, thinking that maybe Nick Madrigal could be a big surprising cut this week.
It's funny because when I just mentioned a minute ago, I was literally just offered a trade. I was just offered Nick Madrigal.
Wow.
So Nick Madrigal is definitely on the block. I can tell you that. I don't know if Connor ends up cutting Nick Madrigal, because I think if Nick Madrigal gets cut, I think he gets scooped up. I mean, I think he has some value. I think a couple guys I'm looking at from Connor's perspective that I would consider cutting include Adolis Garcia for sure. I mean, I've made my disdain of him known pretty publicly. I don't really see the appeal. I think he slumped badly in the second half. I don't think he's going to keep it up. I think he's almost assuredly going to cut Gavin Sheets. I think Jordan Hicks could potentially be a candidate to get cut. I do like the upside with him, but he just can't stay healthy. And I don't think he's necessarily going to jump into the closer's role to start the season. Maybe he jumps into like a high leverage role. But even then, these Holtz guys are replaceable. I think some of the other relievers you mentioned, like Hansel Robles, I think for sure should be a goner. Stalmont, I think, could as well. Chafin, of all his relievers other than Hader, I think I might hold on to if I was him. But he does have some interesting decisions. I think Randall Grichuk low-key could be another one, just because I don't necessarily know if he's going to get 500 ABs again. And even in the 500 ABs he did get, he only had a 281 OBP. And the 22 homers are nice, but you could find 20 homers in the waiver wire pretty easily nowadays, I feel like. In a game that's just become so power heavy. So I don't know. His decisions seem a little easier than I thought from my first glance, but at the same time, I don't think he necessarily has the easiest time. He definitely has a harder time than Yuki.
I think so. And another team that's going to have a tough time is Clayton and Jake. They're going to have to cut how many? 7 guys. And this team also doesn't have very many relievers that they can easily dispose of. I mean, they can maybe you were saying they cut Kendall Graveman, but I don't know. I think he gets scooped up pretty easily. But other than that, I mean, maybe Spencer Howard is an easy cut.
But even Howard's tricky because he was like a top 50 prospect, and regarded pretty highly as recently as last offseason.
Yeah, that's true. It's hard. Andrew Heaney is probably the next easiest cut. But other than that, where do you go? Do you cut Clint Frazier? Do you cut Patrick Corbin? I know Corbin was bad this year, but he's still Patrick Corbin,
Corbin, as much as I have a soft spot for Corbin because he was one of the first big starting pitchers that I traded for back in the first season, I don't really see a justification for keeping him. I think Andrew Heaney is probably the easiest cut on this list because the Yankees have already designated him for assignment. It's just he was bad.
Yeah, I guess Patrick Corbin was on and off waivers a couple of times during the regular season in our league, so I think he's gone.
I held on to him for way too long. I don't know why I did that, but I think Dylan Bundy's probably a goner, 6 ERA. I mean, I think Bundy feels like the type of guy who could be a bit of a sleeper candidate to maybe bounce back next year, but his resume at this point for being a good fantasy starter was 12 starts in 2020. And I don't think that necessarily means he needs to be kept and with these initial cuts. I think Dylan Floro is the type of guy that could be cut. Alex Colomé should probably be cut. I think Clint Frazier, they've had the discussion with his concussions. He may or may not ever play again. He just has not been able to find regular playing time.
Yeah, I don't know if you cut Floro and Column and Graveman, then you're out of relievers.
I mean, they still
you have Edwin Diaz as
Diaz,
one
but I
guy, but
also
you're gonna have
think-
to find something.
Yeah, but I also feel like it's easier to rebuild a bullpen kind of later in the offseason and or at the start of the season once some of these rules for relievers are more established.
That's true, but you don't want to have nobody.
I mean, I kind of went through last offseason basically having traded away every single reliever and kind of look what happened. I was able to make a couple strategic trades and a couple strategic ad drops, and it's doable. I don't, maybe you don't cut all of them, but like Colomé was not particularly good this year and only got the closer's job back because of an injury. I don't think he's worth a roster spot.
I guess. I think Garrett Hampson is probably gone.
Yeah, they just picked him up recently.
He did have 17 steals. But it's still Garrett Hampson. He's not good. And the one other guy that I thought was interesting was Luke Voigt. He was a hot commodity last offseason. But now, I mean, he was hurt for most of the year. And when he was healthy, I mean, he did not hit for much power. And he had a 328 on base percentage, which is fine, but it's certainly not good. So he could be an interesting guy to watch too.
Yeah, absolutely. I think JD Davis is an interesting guy to watch as well. Because the numbers on the surface look pretty, but he hasn't been able to stay healthy. He doesn't really have a defensive position to play, and I wonder if the Mets are even going to keep him. And he had a 426 BABIP, which really bolstered those numbers. I think he probably gets kept, but I could see him getting cut, and I think like a team like a UD could scoop him up and get some cheap a cheap bat. So it's just my 2 cents there. I think this team of all teams, I could be wrong, but I think they have the most cuts to make, and I think that they have the most difficult set of cuts to make of any team.
I believe Eric's got 8 cuts to make. I don't think his are going to be particularly difficult since Eric in the back of his roster, it's always moving. So he's not going to have too much difficulty cutting guys, but he does have 8 guys to cut.
Yeah, I mean, Eric called like 8 guys on the block the other day, and I looked at all those names, and I was like, "There's not a single one of these guys that I think is even worth giving up a 3rd-round pick for." Like, yes,
yeah, I think like
for chunks of the season, but like, does anybody want to trade for Connor Joe?
I do not. He's even got he can demote Royce Lewis too. So there's that. So it's not 8 guys. But I mean, yeah, Lewin Diaz is he's interesting, but he's probably gone.
I traded Lewin Diaz away last offseason for a 2nd-round pick, I think.
Yeah, 2nd rounder. That's interesting. And Lewin Diaz is a guy I think he still has breakout potential, but I don't think he's rosterable right this moment unless you're Andrew and you're banking on a breakout if you have an open spot. And then he's got relievers like Drew Rasmussen can go. No one's going to pick him up. Luke Jackson, same.
Yeah, I'm willing to bet like if Eric cuts 8 guys, maybe 1 gets picked up. Maybe. Speaking of Andrew, and guys to maybe target to see if they're going to bounce back. He only has 1 cut that he needs to make. Is it finally time he cuts Nomar Mazara?
I think it is, and I'm surprised he's saying he's got a difficult cut roster crunch because really he's only got to cut 1 guy, and Nomar Mazara is an easy cut. He's the easiest cut there. I think Andrew's only holding on to him because he's stubborn, and maybe he's only saying he's a roster crunch because it's as a joke, just because, yeah, of course, yeah, Nomar Mazara,
Yeah. No.
But yeah, I think he's an easy cut. He could also, if he had to, he could cut, I don't know, Adrian Morejón. Is he a guy who's fantasy relevant? Probably not. Kyle Freeland had a 4.33 ERA this year. So if he wants to be stubborn about him, he could hold on to him.
How did Kyle Freeland have a 4.33 ERA this year?
Yeah, he was all right. 433, playing half his games at course, mind you.
God, this Kyle Freeland. Okay, he surprisingly did have better peripherals than I thought he did. I guess credit where's credit's due, but I still have no part of Kyle Freeland or any Rockies pitcher. I think Ryan Yarborough looks like a pretty easy cut for him, and Brad Hand's been cut multiple times already, so I think he could be cut as well. Basically, if he really wants to be stubborn and keep M-SABR, I think he still has a couple obvious cuts. But
I think so.
We'll see. Teams have been prone to make some weird cuts and have some weird ad drops.
They certainly are.
What about you? You were one of the teams I wanted to talk about.
Yeah, so I'm looking at my team right here. There's some. I don't know what I'm gonna do. I'll cut. Well, I don't want to, I guess, give away my hand too much. But I have a reliever or two that I can cut, and just one that I can cut. And then from there, I mean, it's no secret that Jock Peterson, I just added him during the playoff run, so he's probably gone. But after that, there are going to be some tough decisions.
I personally think Mike Moustakas is a relatively easy cut, just because he hasn't looked good in a couple years, and he was pretty banged up all of this year. And I don't know if the path to everyday playing time is necessarily there with India playing second and also having to compete with Suarez and Kyle Farmer having a good year. And I don't know about you, but I expect the Reds to bring in somebody else into that infield mix that can play like competently at shortstop, because I don't think they want to put Moose at third and Suarez at short again. I think that was just not good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I mean, it's no secret I've tried to shop Mike Moustakas. There are no takers. My team is no longer named after him, and I'm going to make an announcement on the podcast. Sahil, go in and look at recent transactions.
Oh, did you finally cut Moustakas? Yeah, he did. You know what? I'm glad. This makes me feel better. I hope it was because of me. I forced your hand a bit more to cut him right now.
You did. I mean, I'm a little bevved, mildly, and I think I wanted to make a splash, and that's how I'll do it making moves live on the podcast.
Yeah, I like that somebody's actually making the push to start some of these early cuts, because I feel like we're more likely just going to see a flurry on cut down day as opposed to seeing them early. But I like to see somebody who knows what they're doing and are not holding out false hopes of being able to make trades, which might be a great transition into my team. But
yeah, before we do that, I will say I've got a few young guys that I'm going to have to make tough decisions on. And those, namely, there are three of them: Alec Boehm, Nico Horner, and Joe Adell. I might have to cut one of the three of them, and if it comes down to it, I can't imagine it'll be Adell unless I really talk myself into. No, it's not going to be him. But I mean, Alec Boehm, is he a guy I think can bounce back after a rough year? And then Nico Horner, is he a guy I think is going to be healthy? I know he played super well when he was healthy, although not a lot of power or anything, but he did have a 382 on base. Is he a guy that I think is worth rostering, or if I cut him, will he just not be rostered by anyone? It's interesting there. And then JP Crawford as well. There was one team that was interested in him. I reached out to that team. They said they're not interested now. So maybe he could go, but that would leave Lindor as my only shortstop eligible guy, unless Horner is retaining it for next year. But there's some interesting moves in my infield here for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you are looking at some of those younger guys, like I don't realistically think there's a chance that you cut them. I could see you making a decision later this offseason to move one of them, especially if maybe some trades or some acquisitions kind of go, the way maybe you think, or if a player becomes available and you have to give up somebody like a Bohm or Adele to get them, but it's really worth it. Like I just spitballing here, but like if Yuki made Bryce Harper available, like I'm sure you would be willing to include Alec Bohm, for example, or maybe even Joe Adele. But I don't think you're gonna have to cut those guys to get under the limit. Actually, one more guy that I'm curious about what you're gonna do with him. What are you gonna do with Trevor Bauer?
No comment.
No comment.
Yeah. No comment.
That's fair enough. That's certainly a tricky situation. It's hard. I own Altuve and Correa and George Springer. They were all on that team that cheated. If we want to talk about morals, it's just we could go down a rabbit hole here, which I don't think we need to go down. We're talking about who teams are going to cut. I had set up the segue to my team like 5 minutes ago, and then we got caught up on your team again. So let's transition here. I have to make 6 cuts. Now there are a couple of guys I picked up kind of later in the or after the regular season had ended, and I think I'm more likely to be able to make decisions on them pretty easily. But I have 6 relievers, but unlike last year when a couple of them I had cut already because I was trying to win during the finals, I didn't really cut any of them this year. And these are all guys I really want to keep. I mean, Trennan and Gallegos were the holds winners for our awards, and I think Raisel Iglesias is a top 5 closer next year, assuming he has a closer's job. Lowe, Saiga, and Whitlock are 2 really strong young pitchers, and Will Smith is a closer for a team that just won a World Series. That he obviously has a lot of value. And at the same time, there's not really a ton of hitters I want to cut either. So I have some difficult decisions. I think I know who half of my cuts are going to be, but I think the other half is going to be really hard. And I think there's going to be a guy or 2 I cut that's going to get scooped up off of waivers that I'm not really going to want to cut. That being said, I'm pretty active in trade talks, so perhaps I can make a trade or 2 that would maybe lessen the number of players I have to cut that I really don't want to cut. But I'm not necessarily looking forward to making these decisions, and that's probably part of the reason I've been pushing for trades. But we'll see. I'm having some interesting trade negotiations right now. I was hoping there'd be a deal done today, but it hasn't happened, and we'll see what happens.
Yeah, no, I mean, you're certainly, if you can't find a trade, you're going to have a few tough decisions to make. And I mean, there'll be guys who teams are going to want to add. I mean, and that could come down to maybe having a high waiver order. That's something worth looking at. It looks like Connor is first in the waiver order, followed by Daniel and Greg. I imagine they're not going to be active on the waiver wire. Ruthvik either. And then you're 4th in the waiver order. You're not going to be picking your own guys back up. And then 5th is me. So really, I could have 2nd pick at a guy who's getting cut here. So it'll be interesting. I'm assuming there will probably be, unless you can swing something at the last minute, a big name cut from your team.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of have a loose idea of the guys who would get kind of sacrificed at the end of the day, but there's it's not an easy decision by any means. So we'll see.
But yeah, with that in mind, let's move on to our main topic, which is speaking of trades. We are looking back at a few trades from last year. Like you said, we made 50 trades up to this point in last offseason. So far, we have made 0. But we're going to review a couple of the trades from last year. We're going to actually, this is fun. We're going to take a listen to what our reactions were at the time. I'll splice in that audio. Hopefully it works. But we're going to just talk about what our reactions were at the time and what our reactions are now and how that's changed after a year.
Yeah, I have to say, Cam and I were looking back at some of these trades, and boy, just it's kind of crazy looking back at like some of our reactions and kind of our thoughts about like how these trades are going to play out, and then the effect that it had on these teams and stuff. So that's why we play the games, and we don't just do it off of who puts together the best roster in the off season. But yeah, why don't we go through what's the first trade we want to talk about here?
So let's talk about let's start out with kind of a medium-sized one. This was a trade which was made on October the 16th. The Stanton Stranglers agreed to trade Gio Urshela and Connor's 2021 third to Connor in exchange for Hunter Greene. And that 2021 third round pick, Connor's 2021 third, that is, I ended up going to you, and it ended up going to EBO, then back to Eric, and then to you. And you took Aaron Sabato, first baseman for the Minnesota Twins, who you no longer have. So that turned out to be a non-factor. But essentially, Hunter Greene for Gio Urshela. Let's hear what our thoughts were.
Personally, I thought that Connor got the best out of this deal. Urshela had another very solid season, and I know Hunter Greene's lost a good chunk of the past 2 years with injuries, and I don't know if he's ever going to quite reach his potential.
First of all, a little confused as to why Connor's making this trade. Gio Urshela, I believe he's had him in the past, maybe even on more than one occasion. But the fact that Connor, of all people, is trading a pitching prospect with a very high ceiling for a steady third baseman is a little surprising to me. As for Hunter Greene in particular, I'm very torn. He's just so flashy, and like I said, the ceiling is just so high, but I'm very worried about his ability to stay healthy. There's just no guarantee he can even stay healthy long enough to reach the majors. Okay, yeah, so that's what we thought about the trade at the time. Definitely interesting. You were certainly higher on this for Connor than I was. Well, you said you loved it for Connor due to Hunter Greene's injuries. Maybe there wasn't any sort of market for him. We both really commented on the great season that Gio Urshela had. I was more on the fence about it. I wasn't sure why Connor made the trade at all. And I was just really torn on Hunter Greene in general and about his health. But yeah, essentially, you were definitely on the side of the team which got Urshela, and I was kind of on the fence. How are you thinking about this trade now?
Yeah, I mean, Hunter Greene had a lot better season than I thought he would, or he at least flashed enough for me to be like, Eric probably wins this deal. I think I just had concerns about whether Hunter Greene would be able to stay healthy enough to sufficiently stick into rotation. And I guess while his numbers his numbers were actually pretty solid in Double-A. In Triple-A, maybe not as good, but still the fact he was able to post 21 starts this year, his first start since 2018. And I think that definitely was a big part of my evaluation, is that we hadn't seen him pitch in 2 years. It's I think it's an encouraging sign for Greene. I'm sure you as a Reds fan are excited to see him moving forward. Now, Urshela was coming off back-to-back seasons with a 132 WRC plus in 2019 and a 133 WRC plus in 2020. 355 OBP in 2019, 368 OBP in 2020. So I thought that he was kind of a cheap, solid option to fill in at third base. And I know Urshela is a guy that Connor really liked, because Connor has like owned him on and off multiple times, as have I, interestingly, and I actually now own Urshela, but Urshela just never quite got it together this year. His WRC plus dropped to 96. And I wonder if he's even going to have a starting job for the Yankees next year, or what that's going to look like. He does have shortstop eligibility now, which is interesting, but I think it's safe to say Eric won that deal.
I think it's safe to say that. Speaking as a Reds fan on Hunter Greene, I mean, I'm still a little worried about him staying healthy, especially just with how hard he throws. But on the other hand, he throws so hard. That's awesome. He threw 105 in spring training. He threw 104 in his AAA debut. And he tore up AA. I've been following his season very closely. And he had dropped out of the top 100 on a lot of lists, but now he's jumped way up to 26th in pipeline, which is just absurd. And Connor, I mean, Connor's farm system has taken a massive hit with all the trades he's made. He'd really love to have him now. But really, I wasn't sure why he made the trade at the time. But honestly, with him competing this year, it's the type of trade that had Urshela played up to his previous level, would have been a great trade for him. Really, if he had been, I mean, if Greene had, I guess, not broken out. And so I guess my point is the trade worked out badly, since Greene was good, Urshela was bad. But had they both been their previous self, this would have been a really beneficial trade for Connor, which in a way I wouldn't have expected, with Connor performing well and having another really solid 120 WRC plus bat in his lineup. It wouldn't have pushed him over the top in the finals or anything, but it would have just improved an already good team. But I think, I mean, with the way that this season did play out, Eric's the clear winner of this trade. Hunter Greene looks great.
Yeah, I can't fault Connor for making this move, though, because I think I would have made it, in hindsight, 10 out of 10 times, just with the information I had at that point about both players. I didn't necessarily see a reason to think Urshela was going to slump, and I didn't see a reason that Greene was all of a sudden going to break out. I think I would have been interested in acquiring Greene last offseason, but more at like a discount, and trying to see if I could buy low.
Yeah, I mean, had you bought low on Greene last offseason, you would have hit quite the payoff.
Yeah, oh no, absolutely. Definitely would have been. There are a couple of prospects like that I wish I had bought in on last offseason low. But yeah, anything else, or do we want to move on to the next deal?
No, let's move on to the next one. This was definitely a bigger one at the time. And this is one we were both a little iffy on this trade. We were kind of torn. But let me pull exactly what the details are. So in this trade, this happened on October 13th. But with the Flow traded Zach Plesac. It's 2021 and 2022 seconds, and Andrew's 2022 second to the Stanton Stranglers for Lance Lynn, Dylan Bundy, and Eliezer Hernandez. Let's look at that 2021 second from Bo with the Flow. Ended up being 15th overall. It went, after going to Eric, it went to Andrew. Andrew took Reed Detmers. And then the 2022 picks, Bo with the Flow's 2022 second, Andrew's 2022 second. Andrew's second went, oh man, that bounced around a lot. It had already bounced around, but then it went to me and then back to Andrew eventually. And then the pick, Jake and Clayton's pick, is still with Eric. But those picks are 15 and 18. They're both pretty high picks. But yeah, essentially those picks. So it's Zach Plesac, the pick that became Reed Detmers, two medium to high picks for Lance Lynn, Dylan Bundy, and Eliezer Hernandez. And here is what we thought about it at the time. I like that trade a lot. 3 great starting pitchers going. I think Zach Plesac is the best pitcher in that deal, and he's got the highest ceiling. So it makes sense that he's going on his own in the other direction with the 2 guys coming back. And Dylan Bundy, I'm not super buying it, but the peripherals look really phenomenal for him this year. And it's possible that that Bo the Flow could be getting 2 aces back just for 1. I haven't looked too much into Eliezer Hernandez, but he seems kind of like a throw-in to me. Overall, it's just a lot of moving starting pitchers, and I think it's hard to pick a clear winner.
Really, this comes down to, is Dylan Bundy's breakout this year legitimate? So I buy, just kind of looking at Dylan Bundy this year, that he's made some changes to his game to improve. But that being said, it was only an 11-start sample size. He wasn't as good the second half of the season as he was the first half of the season. And I'd be interested to see what he does over the course of a full season. But I would agree with you, Cam, that Zach Plesac is probably the best pitcher in the deal. I buy Cleveland's kind of pitching development, and Plesac is a couple years younger than Bundy. So I think Eric got the best pitcher. I think you're right. Lance Lynn had a very solid season. I think he can keep it up for a couple years. I think he is a little bit on the older side, but I mean, the numbers have been great over the course of his career, and there's no reason to me that he can't, keep this up and be a solid starter for both the Flow. I think Eliezer Hernandez is kind of a throw-in, but I think that there's some decent upside there. So ultimately, I mean, I'm usually on the side of the team who gets the best player. So I think I'd slightly lean towards Eric here, and hard to tell without knowing how Dylan Bundy is going to do moving forward. So good deal for both sides, though.
Okay, so yeah, a lot of thoughts about this. We both, the main takeaway was we both agreed that Zach Plesac was the best pitcher in the deal, which very much turned out to be not correct. Lance Lynn had a great year. I liked Lynn, but I was not buying Bundy, so I was right about that. But my conclusion was that that you couldn't really pick a clear winner here. As for you, you really thought that it came down to whether Dylan Bundy's breakout was legit or not. It turned out not to be. But you did think that Lance Lynn could be solid, and you thought there was upside with Eliezer Hernandez, but you came out slightly being on Eric's side, with Eric receiving what you thought was the best pitcher in the deal. What do you think about this trade now?
Not how I expected this to come out. Lynn was fantastic this year, and it's kind of ironic, and it worked out for Eric in a sense, because he ended up getting Lance Lynn back and giving up a couple pieces and Luke Voigt and Kyle Lewis, who really didn't make an impact this year. So I guess for Eric, all is well that ends well. Plesac, in hindsight, maybe should have been a little lower on. I feel like he's a little bit of a kind of a knucklehead. Like I know he had the issues of COVID in 2020, and I think he had another violation this year. I think what really concerned me, and which I'm still trying to find an answer for, is why did the strikeout rate drop so much? He had a 9.27 K per nine in 2020, was a 6.31 in 2021. I mean, I've read some things that suggest maybe he pitched a bit differently this year, wasn't as aggressive, and I'm kind of concerned, because if he's not getting back to that, I mean, then he's a pretty average pitcher, and he had a 4.67 ERA this year. That 4.73 FIP was right on right what his ERA was. So he deserved everything that he got. So I mean, obviously Jake wins this trade just with Plesac struggling, despite Bundy struggling, and despite him trading away Eliezer Hernandez, who I think you could argue is the second best pitcher from that trade this year.
I think you really could. And even though he's not on Jake's team, and we I don't remember we talked about this earlier this episode or off the air right before the episode. But we both think that Eliezer Hernandez is definitely an interesting guy for sure.
Does Eric still have Plesac? Because the way I see this, if he does, no, it doesn't look like he does. Because I was gonna say like it could be an unequivocal win for him if Plesac bounces back next year. He already got Lynn back, but I guess there is the potential that Lynn maybe is not able to keep this up just with the advanced age. Not that I think that that's the case for the record. And maybe Plesac's able to bounce back and this looks worse for him just because Plesac's like 26 and Lynn's like 33.
34, I think.
I think this worked out for Eric in the end, and he's a winner because he got Lynn back and he won the championship. I think it's pretty simple. And Jake was not able to take the value that he got in getting Lynn and really turning it into something useful. Now, maybe Kyle Lewis bounces back. Maybe Luke Voigt bounces back, but I'm not as confident about that as I was when he traded away Lance Lynn back in. I want to say it was May he did that trade with Eric.
Yeah, so I think, in the kind of the micro sense, I would say that Clayton and Jake won the trade because they're the team that got Lance Lynn. They gave up Plesac, who kind of struggled this year. And I looked up Plesac. Eric traded him and Jordan Montgomery to Andrew for the 7th pick in this upcoming draft. That was Anthony's 2022 first. So it's kind of an interesting trade. Jordan Montgomery was more of a bigger piece. Actually, that was the most recent trade that's been made. That was right at the deadline. There has not been a trade made since that one.
Oh, wow. I didn't realize that.
Yeah, but Jordan Montgomery kind of feels like the bigger name in that trade at the time. So Plesac was the value had dropped that much already at that point. It looks like Andrew got a future second also. That's a hypothetical thing that hasn't maybe they haven't talked about just yet. With that condition being fulfilled, but yeah, really, I think Clayton and Jake won in the micro sense with they got the better players in the deal. Although it still does remain to be seen what's going to happen with those draft picks. But really, with all the moves Eric was able to make subsequently, that's what helped him out. That's what got him to the finals, especially getting Lynn back.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting because, and this is a slight tangent, but looking back at some of the moves that Jake and Clayton made this year in the trade market, like I don't come away super impressed. And some of it is trading away some of the guys they had got this past offseason, and trading away Lynn was definitely a big part of that. And I wonder just to the extent that some of these moves are going to hurt them, even though they were able to bounce back during the season. So
yeah, no, absolutely. But yeah, so there's one more trade that we wanted to mention quickly. And this is one, this was the Adam Duvall trade. Let me pull up what exactly the terms of this were. So you traded a player to be named later to the Will Smith for Alex and Zach's 2022 second. That player to be named later turned out to be Adam Duvall. That 2022 second ended up going to EBO and then to Jake and Clayton. It's number 16 in this draft. And yeah, so it was pick 16 for Adam Duvall. This trade kind of turned out to be a little bit consequential. And we don't even have a clip for it. We didn't talk about it. Essentially it was episode 3, the third ever episode of the podcast. We were talking about a bunch of trades. This was in what we called minor trades, trades that didn't matter. I didn't mention the trade once. You mentioned it, but only as a segue to talk about other trades where you acquired a bunch of second rounders, which you eventually turned into Eddie Rosario. So needless to say, this trade did not kind of make a blip on our radar this year or last year. But now with Adam Duvall, he led the National League in RBIs this year. He had a very valuable season. What are you thinking now about this trade?
Yeah, and I think that this is a great example of every move matters. And sometimes you make moves that just seem so inconsequential at the moment, but they can have such a big impact on how the league like operates from there, and like just kind of like what happens. It's all just a giant tree of trades that we have. In the end, I'm still glad I made that trade, and here's why. Those second round picks that I got turned into Eddie Rosario. Eduardo Rodriguez, who I acquired, I think, a year ago today for a third round pick, and Jameson Taillon, who I got for you in the Luis Matos deal, along with like a 2026 first round pick and second round pick, turned into Brandon Woodruff. And as a dynasty asset, I would much rather have Brandon Woodruff than Adam Duvall. I think Woodruff is doing great things for my team. He was a huge part of my rotation. At times during the year, he was my most consistent starter. So while I wish that, maybe I had given up more for Adam or gotten more for Adam Duvall, kind of knowing what had happened in hindsight, like I'm not regretting the chain of events that helped set off. Also, Adam Duvall was a free agent pickup. And I know we didn't talk about it on the podcast, but if you recall, like I think both of us kind of in our private chats were just kind of like, I can't believe Andrew, traded a pick for Adam Duvall of all people, who I picked up off of waivers. So I don't know. It's just it worked out for him. What I don't like though was his follow-up trade, where he traded away Adam Duvall. He traded Duvall and his 2022 or in Eric's 2022 third round pick to Connor for Austin Hayes, which I recall not having great things to say about at the trade deadline. I thought, I'm not that high on Austin Hayes moving forward. I think he'll be okay. But I think he could have gotten more for Duvall, just given, his performance up until that point in the season. So, yeah, what do you think?
Yeah, I think he probably could have gotten more. But if you remember, you were kind of roasting him for owning Adam Duvall at all. But
yeah, I did.
Yeah. But I mean, Adam Duvall had a great season. I mean, he didn't have the on-base percentage, but he hit for some power. He drove in all those runs, of course. And I just really like Adam Duvall. He's great. The former Red, of course. And I'm happy to see him doing well, especially since he really, really struggled in his first half season with the Braves after being traded from the Reds for Lucas Sims and Matt Whistler. So seeing him, he was sent down to the minors. He tore up the minors, got called back up, and has really just kind of made his way into the lineup. He went from the Braves to the Marlins, then back to the Braves, and he's just been really crushing the ball. I'm happy for him, and I think as for what this means for the league, it really just goes to show how hard it is to grade a trade. You don't know what's going to come after it. You don't know how long a team is going to hold on to a player anyway. And really, you don't know what's going to happen. Zach Plesac looks like the most promising player in a deal, and he's turns out to maybe have a rough year. Whereas Eliezer Hernandez, I think he's a throw-in. He turns out to go to my team 5 months later, and I'm happy to have him.
Yeah, it's sometimes you make trades, or I feel like when teams make a lot of trades, especially like you and me, like Eric, you're not making all these trades with the expectation that you're going to hit on every trade. You are going to miss on some of these trades, but if on balance you're hitting on more of these trades than you're missing on, you're going to improve your team. And sometimes, you know, you can't foresee that the trades are going to be bad, and sometimes you probably should have seen it and you're just kind of dumb, and you know, you realize it a week later, like, fuck, maybe I shouldn't have done this. And sometimes maybe you get lucky, like I did. Like I remember when I traded away Gleyber Torres last off season, I was really regretting it. I was like, here's a 23-year-old young piece. I was like, maybe Eric just gave me too good of an offer to be true, but now I got to start Jonathan BR. And now I look at it and like, Gleyber's not that good. And I was able to turn that into Meadows and you know, get Woodruff back and some other pieces. And you just never know how these things work out. So it's fun. That's why I love trading. It's, you know, it's like, you know, it's like gambling without, you know, the risk of going into financial ruin. Although
that's true. That's what fantasy
team.
Baseball is.
Yeah, you can ruin your team, but at least you can control your destiny a little bit more.
I mean, a team can never be truly ruined for that long, you know? We thought Andrew's team was toast and dead for 5 years going into this year, and now he was not the worst team, and he's got a bright future. So you really never know, and you can't. There's only so bad your team can be, really.
No, it's crazy how this all works out. But here we are.
Here we are.
All right. Anything else on these trades that we want to talk about? I personally thought this was fun. We need to revisit some of these trades again sometime soon. I know there are a lot of trades that were made the rest of the offseason. I'm sure that we'll, you know, kind of go back through them. I'd love to review the Tatis deal a year from now, or a year from when it was made, because or low-key, like a lot of those pieces that ended up getting dealt, or there were kind of some consequences there, and you know, I'd love to, you know, go over some more of these trades, but this was fun.
Yeah, no, for sure. And we can talk about, there are other trades we can talk about even a couple of years down the line, because we're coming up on 4 years since our inaugural draft. So we'll have some 3-year anniversaries of trades coming up. It's going to be fun. You know, this league is it's maturing. We're kind of there's a lot going on and a lot of milestones.
Yeah. Oh no, I agree. I mean, we are the league started in the April of 2018, so it's about to be April of 2022 here in 5 months. That's nuts.
Yeah.
Man, we're getting old.
We are. We're going into our 5th season.
Yeah, that's hard to believe. Even for me too. I know that like just Eric's decision to start this league was so consequential for other dynasty leagues I've done too, because like I brought this idea of doing a dynasty league to some of my other friend groups. So we started doing a dynasty football league, and that led one of my friends to start a dynasty basketball league. And it's just, I am all in on these dynasty leagues now. So it's just, it's kind of, we talk about how these trades have snowballed. It's just also some of these singular events too. It's just kind of crazy how they have snowballed, and wouldn't trade it for anything.
Yeah. So how did this league start? We've talked a lot about the draft, but we've never really talked about what happened before the draft. Was it Eric's idea to start the league, or did he just volunteer? This is a question we should be asking him.
Yeah, you know what? I think
he just volunteered to be commissioner.
I think he might have just volunteered to be a commissioner. Because I remember giving some thought to volunteering, but I was like, this is like my second meeting. So it's like, I'm not going to volunteer to do this. And I'm glad I didn't, because Eric does a much better job than, you know, I would have. But I think he volunteered. I don't know if this
I remember in a meeting, and I'm not sure if this was the first meeting was mentioned, but essentially we all, there was one point we signed up, and we all had to kind of decide whether we wanted a partner or not.
Yeah.
And I remember I was sitting in a chair, and then I was the first person, I guess due to seniority, to be chosen, to be asked, do I want a partner or not? And then I was like, hey, Duncan, do you want to be my partner? And he said, sure. And then that thus became Abort Pujols.
Yep. Man, I don't remember exactly how I became partners with Michael Davis, other than he just ended up being my partner and it never showed up. So I run the team myself, and God, could you imagine if I had a co-owner? I don't think I'd be able to do it.
I mean, I think you would have forced your co-owner out pretty quickly.
I like to think I would have. I think I would have either just been so active that I would have kind of pushed him to the side, or I would have pawned him off to another team.
Hmm.
Back in a time where, like, I think when we finished that first season, there was like 6 active like teams of 12.
Wow, that's crazy.
Yeah, that's hard to believe. Now we have a full league of active teams, and it's exciting.
Yeah, no, it is. We've got yeah, a lot of moves that are being made all the time. Every team is active, and it's a lot of fun. We're kind of in a golden age, and maybe the golden age has already happened, but I guess it's going to remain to be seen. But speaking of the history of the league, that's a good segue into the last thing we wanted to talk about today. And that is, of course, the thing that's kind of sweeping across the league, and that is the team names bracket. This was Eric's idea. And what it is, we were kind of in on it from the start. We wanted to help with the seeding. We both were unable to find a way to seed teams. So Eric was able to do it himself. Definitely thankful for that, because I had no way of deciding how I would possibly want to seed these teams. But Eric somehow did it, and we are voting on what the best team names across all 4 dynasty leagues are. So it's a lot of fun. Right now, we've had a few of the playing games. Evan's cool team is up, has a 13-0 sweep forming against Daniel's team. I think it might be time to call that matchup. That's in the football bracket. Albert Pujols beat I'm Like That. There was the Fightin' Bellies beat the Fighting Bellies. And then we're going to start within the next couple days, I'm assuming, getting into some interesting matchups. Acuna Matata without Acuna is facing Acuna Matata as the 413 in the older baseball bracket. There's a matchup between the two of us. Abort Pujols is facing Church of Hanagod. That'll be fun. I'm the 3 seed, you're the 14. My new team name actually was given the 15 seed. I feel a little shafted by that. I'm facing up against the Stanton Stranglers. So that's going to be an interesting matchup, me versus Eric. But on the whole, it's a fun bracket. What are you thinking?
Yeah, it's fun. I like to thank Eric for taking my idea and actually doing all the legwork for it, because I have no time to actually do this. As you know, I am delusional right now. But I think Eric did a great job putting together this bracket, and definitely kind of, I think the hardest part too was he went together and got all the old names, which I'm really impressed about. And, you know, I know we had a couple we had to fill in at the last second, but like, I would have had a hard time, especially for like the football league, which was on CBS the first 2 years and is no longer active on CBS. It's on Yahoo now. And like, you know, just like going through the basketball and the hockey leagues, remembering some of these names. Kudos to Eric for putting it together. I'm really looking forward to this. I know we have a lot of fun doing the defining moments bracket each year, but you know, I think this is kind of a nice way to mix things up. You know, as much as I like the defining moments bracket, you know, there's only so many new moments that we're able to talk about when there's so many of the old ones that we want to be able to keep into the bracket. So I'm excited. I did love the Fighting Bellies versus the Fighting Bellies first round matchup. That just felt so fitting. I do think it's kind of a shame that your name was a 15 seed, but I mean, it is kind of brand new. I think in terms of the quality of the name, it deserves to be higher. But when you're taking into account the history associated with the name, I see why it's put as a 15 seed. But there's some good ones, and I'm excited. I'm kind of hoping for some of my names to make it. I feel like I'm not that good at naming teams. I feel like I kind of stuck myself into the Yellow Champs kind of early on and haven't really changed. But I have a couple team names in like non-M-SABR leagues that I'm particularly proud of, including my newest team name in my other Dynasty Basketball League after acquiring Jordan Poole and Mo Bamba in the same trade. I'm now the Blue Bamba brand. But maybe I'll think of something better. I was thinking of something with Max Fried, like Kentucky Fried Chicken or Fried Chicken Nugent, which if Chicken Nugent is not one of the finalists, I'm going to be pretty mad. I think you would agree with me there.
Yeah, no, I was going to ask what your favorite name in the bracket was. Are we both in agreement that Chicken Nugent is the best name there's ever been?
I think it's hard to beat. North Korea is pretty good.
Yeah, both names made up by AJ.
Yeah, I mean, AJ's biggest contribution to these leagues is the names. I was thinking about speaking of Korea, maybe naming my team Korea Virus, although didn't know if that was too soon.
I mean, you can always just be North Korea again.
I could.
Or you could be South Korea.
South Korea.
There you go.
Holy shit.
If you're not named South Korea by the time we stop recording, I'm gonna be upset.
Okay, let's hold on.
And you know the South Korean flag, it's got the yin yang in the middle. Both of them can be Carlos Correa's face. There's your logo right there. I'll even make it for you.
Oh, please do, because I have no ability to use Photoshop. Oh my god, that would be funny. If only for the purposes of getting into the bracket, I'm going to change my name to that, at least very briefly. We'll see if I'm willing to stick with the big league Yellow Champs or stick with South Korea once I change my name to that. But
all right,
I feel like it'd be weird if I wasn't the Yellow Champs. I feel like it would just throw everybody off.
I mean, you've had a few different names already, so it's not like Yellow Champs has been your only name, like Moneyball or something like that.
Yeah, but it was all like in the first season.
Yeah.
But also, another fun finals matchup would be Giovanni is a Wonderland versus Giovanni is a Wonderland.
Yeah, I'm not sure about that. Where are those seated?
What one's in the baseball, one's in the football. So.
Yeah, but like, what are their seedings?
Oh, let me pull that back up. I just set the bracket up. Giovanni is a Wonderland is a 2 seed. It's about to face Jordan Poole, which beat Jesse Franklin. And Giovanni is a Wonderland is a 13 seed. It's playing the executive balling order in the first round, which is not as iconic as the executive batting order. So I could see that maybe getting past, but boy, that's a tough first round matchup.
Mm-hmm. I was surprised to see the number 1 football seed was a name that was mine, Josh and Josh, after my 2 Josh quarterbacks.
How's Chicken Nugent not the number 1 seed? How do we?
I don't know. I mean, I'm happy with Josh and Josh. I edited the Drake and Josh logo to make a fun logo, but yeah, no, Chicken Nugent, come on.
Yeah, if I had to project, I think Chicken Nugent, every villain is Lemons. One of the Klay Thompson team names. I think that's the non-baseball names that are going to come out. I couldn't tell you what's going to come out for the baseball ones because I think there are just so many good options and a lot of history behind some of these names. But like how do you judge like a North Korea v Team Resnick like matchup in the Final Four?
Yeah, no, I spoke to someone recently who said that they're expecting Team Resnick to be the winner of the whole thing. Um, so we'll see what comes out on top. I really have no idea how this is going to go and what people are going to vote for.
Yeah, me neither.
Yeah.
No, I'm excited. I'm sure there's going to be a couple surprises, and I'm sure there's going to be a lot of people angry with some of the results in individual matchups. But I'm looking forward to this. It'll be fun.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And yeah, is there anything else we have to talk about today? Anything you want to mention here before we go?
Trying to think. Not really. Hopefully there's some trades by the time we talk next. I mean, I feel like I keep saying that at the end of every podcast. I'm hoping there's something, and I think there will be. I think there almost has to be. Like we can't just be sitting here and nothing going on. We're gonna have to see some roster cuts, and I can't wait to talk about the roster cuts next week.
Yeah, no, I can't wait either. Our third consecutive episode talking about some sort of roster cut. But yeah, no, if that's all we had, then yeah, nice talking with you today, and we'll see you all next week.
Yep. See you then.
Yeah, no, I'm ready. I'm drinking a beer that's 8.2%, so I'm ready to spew some hot takes.
Oh, absolutely. You're buzzed. I'm delusional. What can go wrong?